Well, good morning, everybody. It's welcome to this. I think it's the fourth or fifth virtual meeting that we've had this year. I do know that if ordinary circumstances had continued, whatever that might mean these days, this would have been our 16th meeting of 2020. So the year is almost gone. If, like me, you've become somewhat addicted to reading blogs and tweets about online streaming, you'd be aware that the big issue in the last couple of weeks has been just how everyone is over all those fake backgrounds which make it look like you're somewhere really interesting when actually you're just boring old working at home. And so I've gone along with the trend. The green screen trickery is just so June and July. We're all over it. So as you see, no fakery today. I'm just sitting here in my own front parlour and I'm just keeping it real, bro. Just keeping it real. One of the things that we've had to do, of course, is to match the decor. We've had to dress up the agenda with a nice little frame. So this is what we're going to be doing today. Welcome. Well, yeah, welcome. Followed up, of course, by news and gossip, and it's been quite a busy week in the world of family history. Second item, I think, will be a report on our software survey. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to that. I'll let you know what I think I've found and what use it might be to us. Then a short presentation on e-resources at the National Library. A week or two back I did a piece in the Tween Meeting News and I was sure that it was perfectly clear what I'd written. When I came to reread it I thought, yeah, not many people are going to dive into that. And since I was highlighting the availability of post-1955 newspapers, I think it really is important that people know how to use that. So a short presentation this morning demonstrating what was supposed to happen. Just keeping an eye on the chat. If any gremlins creep into the sound or the pictures, do let me know. Next item on the agenda, as you see there, is called I Used to Know How To. I'm not sure that it's going to be a regular feature, but the background to it is that last meeting we showed you the first of our 2-minute tips, and I said, can anyone suggest some more 2-minute tips that might be useful? And thanks to Les, he said, look, I've been using the 1946 aerial photos and there have been some changes there. Maybe you could do a 2-minute tip to show people how to use it again. Well, there will be a 2-minute tip on PD Online, the Brisbane City Council mapping thing, but the further I got into it, I used to know how to do this, and it really is the same, but just different enough to be annoying. So there's a little short segment there letting you know how it's been altered and how you can get the best out of it. Our main attraction today is the image-only collections on Family Search. I'm a bit torn about this presentation, I must confess. There's a reason why I think teachers are so clever. It's because every time they prepare a lesson, they learn something new. And certainly in my case, when I volunteer to do a presentation, I find out lots of stuff that I thought I knew about the particular topic. This one, as I say, I'm torn. I think I now know less about image-only collections than I thought I did a few months ago. I actually began to prepare this back in February. It was going to be a live presentation. I put it aside, resurrected it for today and thought, I just got to polish this up. And the more I went into it, the more I realised this is an enormous, well, called a collection, yes, collections, plural. So I'm inviting you to come along with me on a journey of exploration. I'm not entirely sure that I've discovered the most important features, but I've learned a lot, and I hope you will too. And we'll finish up, as always, with what's coming up in the world of family history, so you can adjust your diaries. And as I hinted before, scattered through there will be 3 more of our 2-minute tips. And I'm pretty happy with how they're developing. I'd like to produce some more, and perhaps at the end of today's meeting, if we haven't run horribly over my scheduled time, I'll show you where I'm linking to those on our website, so that if any of them are the tips you want to look at again, you'll be able to. So, without further ado, let's jump across into news and gossip. And the first piece of news which grabbed my attention this week, oh no, that's this one takes me back a little more than a week. Good news, of course, is that the family history room at Strathpine is open. There are some computers available in order to maintain the distance between users. Some of the computers are not functional, but I went in, sat down, fired up the computer, typed in my user number off my library card, and the system said, "What's your password?" I said, "I never set a password for this. We didn't have passwords." Well, now we do. So do make sure, if you're going down to the library to use the computers in the family history room, that you check that you know the password you have on your library account. And if you don't have one, that you set it up, because unfortunately, at least a week and a half ago, the system for resetting a password in the library has some blips in it. It appears not to like to talk to Gmail addresses to send out a change of password. So I suggest you look at that in advance before you go down. But the good news, of course, is that the family history room is open and you can go in and use the computers. And if you have your own laptop, you can connect to the Wi-Fi and not need to worry about having a password to get into a computer. So this week I saw this message conversation around the use of Find My Past, about private messaging, that you can contact other members of Find My Past, as we've always been able to do with Ancestry. Oh, that's interesting, given the complaints that we have about people never answer on Ancestry. And so I thought I'll just explore that a little bit and let people know what's going on. And see, I always learn new things. The conversations are taking place in the UK because, as you see on this slide, the feature is only available on findmypast.co.uk at the moment. It will arrive on findmypast.com.au soon. I'm not quite sure what soon means in that context, but it's something to watch out for. It also means that you may want to reconsider your choice about what Find My Past called shared hints. About 12 months ago, I advised you that this was coming in and that you were able to opt out of shared hints, which is Find My Past version of Ancestry Shaky Leaves. Well, you might need to rethink that, because if you don't have shared hints on, you won't get messaging capability. You may think that's a good thing. I'll leave it up to you. This should have been mentioned at our last virtual meeting, but somehow it finished up on the, we can't say the cutting room floor, in the file of things which should have appeared on screen but didn't. Because you recall that when Paul told us how he'd been spending the last 20 odd weeks, he talked about saving enormous amounts of money getting free digital records from TNA, National Archives UK. It's still available. If you haven't tried it out, I suggest that you do. If you have tried it out and you're not sure how to make the best of it, think positive thoughts about Paul, because I've asked him to do a presentation for a future meeting on how you can do that. So no pressure, mate, but lots of people are waiting on that presentation. The news broke a couple of weeks ago, but it's still fairly current, that RootsTech, the big international conference run by Family Search, it was originally in Salt Lake City, then they moved version to London. I know a few people who flew to London last year to be part of it, reckon it's the greatest conference ever, but it has fallen victim of the health issues at the moment, and 25 to 27 February 2021, that's next February, RootsTech will be online. It's offering a huge range of activities, as they normally do live, and you can register to take part in a live conference. But as you see in the bottom right corner there, the thing about RootsTech is that it offers access to content year-round. Now, not all the sessions, but in fact you can still attend virtually RootsTech 2019 and 2020 if you go to this URL, rootstech.org video archive, where you can look at past sessions, and presumably you will be able to do the same thing next year. So you have the option of signing up online to be a virtual participant over 3 days, or you can simply sit back and catch up on the recordings later on. A couple of meetings back, I showed you the Police Book of Names and mentioned the wonderful police museum in headquarters of police service in Roma Street. I also get a blog by email about once a week, I think, with the occasional extra thrown in from the police museum. And I got an interesting one recently, which included these two characters. On the left of screen, you see a US Navy personnel who was sent to Brisbane as part of the submarine corps, the US submarines, which used to be berthed down at Hamilton during the war. But he was moved to the Shore Patrol, the US Naval Police, and was seconded to Queensland Police with the very important task of going and buying sly grog. He would travel around town asking if anybody knew where a Yank could get a drink in this town. He would then go in, buy some illicit liquor, come outside, point the way to the Queensland police detectives who would go in and bust them. On the right, we see, I think she was PW5, one of the very early policewomen, who had a similar role. She would go in plain clothes with a young detective, posing as a young couple out on the town looking for a good time. Similarly, ask where they could buy a bottle of something to celebrate with, and then would dob in the offenders. So a great story, the sort of thing which you can pick up if you subscribe to the Police Museum blog. And while we're talking about the Police Museum, their Sunday lectures start again. They're free lectures from 11 till 12:30, generally on the last Sunday of the month. Not always historical. Sometimes it's police procedures, and I tend not to go to those. This coming Sunday is an interesting one. It's archaeology and anthropology. It's a report on the excavation of sites of native mounted police camps and what they've found out about them. So if you're interested in that, the Police Museum site will let you book for that. I also get not too frequent updates from Family Search, and this one jumped out at me. Family Search updates its genealogy search page. Well, the first thing that puzzled me was I haven't noticed any different, and what on earth do they mean by the genealogy's search page? So went in to investigate, and it turns out the genealogy search page is a page that I not say very rarely, until Sunday night I'd never looked at. I don't know why. It's pretty obvious on the menu once you see it, but I'd never been there. And in fact, as it says here, genealogies are trees submitted to Family Search that can help you fill out your family lines. It's quite separate to any of the records or the shared tree that's created in Family Search. This is like public trees on Ancestry. And the key bit of news that they were telling me was that they've added this plus sign under ancestor name, where you can add a second name. So when I tested that out, I realised what you can do. Here I've put in Martha Washington, which is the wife of the President of the United States, but you can also search Martha Dandridge, which was her maiden name. So not searching for two separate people, but two names for the same person. That's quite an interesting feature, I thought. It's significant that I chose George Washington's wife for this, because the genealogy search page is almost exclusively US. It's interesting to look at, but unless you have a lot of links to the United States in your family tree, it's probably not going to be much use to you. But it was interesting. If you think that sort of news will be of interest to you, you can go to the Family Search blog. Simply adding blog EN for English, because it's a multi-language blog, and catch up on these little snippets of news from Family Search. And that's about all the news of this week. So, been a fairly busy time, or maybe it's just me. So, no complaints on the chat that I'm not coming through loud and clear, so that's good. Let's move on then to the next item on the agenda. We'll just check that it's all ready to go. There we go. And bring that up. And there, of course, is a whole lot of family trees. And this was the survey form that I put on our website. I'll begin by apologising again for the fact that the form in which I put the questions in there, you could only provide one answer to each question. I was aware that that was a difficulty. It was just easier on the day to do it. So apologies to those people who use multiple software and multiple online trees. Well, yeah, bad luck. Sorry. This is what the results look like. If any of you have been wary of responding to surveys through the website, that's exactly what it shows. The time at which the record was submitted, an IP address, that where on the internet. All that will really tell me is who your internet provider is. It certainly can't let me identify who you are. And then the answers that you gave to each question. So totally anonymous unless you send me an email complaining, and then I'll know what your answer was. Helen and Elizabeth. This is the status at the moment. The options for desktop software. Just under 40% of the respondents are using Legacy Family Tree, which didn't surprise me. It's the one that we talk most about and was part of the motivation for doing this survey. Is it true that everybody still mainly uses Legacy Family Tree? And it's a bit of a yes but, because 30% use Family Tree Maker, which I knew was our second most popular thing. 7% Roots Magic. 4% use Personal Ancestral File, which, well, let's face it, it ought to be in a software museum, but the great thing about it is that it still works, and if it does the job, keep using it. We got nearly 12% of people using something which I didn't guess. I thought I'd run a pretty comprehensive search of what people might be using, but there are at least, I think it's 3 people who said they use something other. Thanks to Helen Smith for pointing out to me that I'd missed Herald and one of the many things which have ancestor in their name. I was intrigued that just under 8% of the group don't use desktop software at all. They simply rely on an online source for keeping their data, which is interesting. And by comparison, when we look at the online trees, 12% of the respondents don't have any tree online at all. So a small number on one end exclusively online, a slightly larger number on the other end not online at all. In the middle, more than 60% of you have trees on Ancestry. Find My Past and Family Search, about equal, at tick over 11%. One lonely tree on My Heritage. So, broadly confirmed roughly what I thought. What's interesting is when we put these together, we see that people who use Legacy Family Tree as their desktop software, the second row from the top there, use it in association, well, someone uses it in association with all of the online methods. So one person uses it local storage only, one uses it to upload to Find My Past, 6 to Ancestry, 1 to My Heritage, 1 to Family Search. Equally, if we run down that third column, the Ancestry column, users of Ancestry link it to almost every type of desktop software except Roots Magic, which is interesting. I suspect the Roots Magic users are using Macs, because of course Legacy Family Tree isn't available for a Mac. You can almost make it work, but it's a bit technical and a bit fiddly. So now we've got all this data, what does it mean? Well, frankly, we've got to give it some serious thought. Although we have, it shows 9 there. On the previous slide there were 10 because there was some late data came in. There are 10 people using Legacy Family Tree compared to 8 or 9 for Family Tree Maker. So if we focus exclusively on Legacy Family Tree, we're not really meeting all the needs. As I say, we need to think about what that might mean and decide on the implications. Let's just check how we're doing. Whoa. Just chat amongst yourselves, guys. I'm just bringing up this one. That looks good. Put that on there and there. And let's move to Nla E Resources. And if we click that off, and that should now be the live one. Now this is where we all cross our fingers and toes and hope that the slides actually will change as we go through. So let's find out a little bit about National Library of Australia e-resources and how do we find them? Well, first up, I simply went into Google and searched for Nla E Resources. And thank you, Google, pops up the very first thing we get. So click on that. And this is why I didn't just give you a URL. That is the URL that you would have to type in to get to the e-resources page. So far simpler to let Google do the work for you. Alternatively, you could simply go to the National Library page, nla.gov.au, and scroll all the way to the bottom, because you just get up my little laser pointer, right here, the very last text on the page will connect you to e-resources. So you can try to interpret that awful URL, work from the homepage of the library, or simply let Google find the link for you. However you get there, this is what you will see. A really simple, spare looking page, and the important thing to watch is up the top here. For full access, log in with your National Library card details. At this point, I was going to demonstrate to you how I logged in. And this is where my computer proved to be smarter than I was, because when I clicked to begin that process, as you see, it said welcome, and my computer logged me in without me needing to worry about it. Now, I think that's a wonderful thing, and I don't want to break it in order to show you how to get in, because it might not go back to doing it automatically. So bear with me, I will show you at the end of the presentation how we can get in to this resource. You notice we're on a search tab and the keywords. So I can quite simply type in some keywords, influenza pandemic 1919 Australia, and hit search, and it's pretty much what you would expect from any search, bears a vague resemblance to the new Trove. Let's scroll down the page a little so we can see what we're looking at. We have a series of potted descriptions of documents. We have over here filters we can apply, subjects, formats, dates, and so on. We notice that this comes from the database called Academic Search Complete. This one from the database master file Premier. And we can open any of these by clicking. Any of these icons will show us different aspects, and indeed we can see the full text. And if I was conducting detailed research, that would be what I would do. But for the moment, let's just wind back to the previous thing, and instead of search, let's check Browse E Resources here, the second tab. It gives us a search box again, but don't type in the topic you're searching for. Here you have to type in the titles of resources, not topics. If I was to put in the same search results, it says no results were found. But we were just looking at it, so let's go back. If I begin to type something like Sydney morning, it immediately recognises it as a type of resource. So in the browse area, think of titles of resources that you want to use. Begin to type them. It will detect. Notice I didn't need to type the, it ignored that. And we'll come back here and have a look at this Sydney Morning Herald archives, which was the resource that I was aiming to tell you about in the tween meeting news. But before we do that, I'd like to have a look at this over here. You notice there are three icons which appear beside things here. The first one is called Free Resources, and you can view them from home without going through the National Library. So don't bother using the National Library e-resources to access any resource that shows the globe. You can do it yourself from your home computer without bothering to connect through. On the bottom, we've got the ones which the icon is actually the front of the National Library building, because these 88 resources, called on-site resources, can be viewed only while you're in the library building. So there's no point clicking on them. All it will tell you is, oh, are you in the building here in Canberra? No, you're not. Well, you can't have it. Which leaves us with the golden keys resources, the good ones. Things you cannot access from your computer without connecting to the library first, but you can get them from home. So they're the type that we're going to be looking for. And as you probably noticed on the previous slide, the Sydney Morning Herald archive has just such a key. There's the golden keys. So let's open it up and see what's inside. And here we have the basic first page. Remembering this is one newspaper only, the Sydney Morning Herald, the major daily in Sydney, or one of the major dailies in Sydney, and this is post-Trove. So after 1955, if you want a story out of a Sydney paper, this is where you need to come. Now, notice we're in browse mode up here. You can select a year, you can select a month. If you choose, you can select a day of the week, and it will pop up that particular paper for you. We're probably more interested in search mode, so let's jump across here. And here we see we've got something that looks very like the advanced search mode for Trove. You can put in all of these words, that is, every word here must appear. this exact word or phrase, the same as putting it in quotes in Trove, and any of these words or exclude these words. So that here, these are my and words. These are my quotes. These are my or words. And in Trove, I would put a not beforehand. So let's throw in some words to see what we've got. I put in an exact phrase, Graham Thorne, and any of these words, lottery or kidnap. And I guess most of us are of an age that this brings to mind a sensational event which occurred in Sydney not that long after the 1955 cut-off. But how did the papers cover? Let's have a look and see. Search, yes please. And this is what we see. This was, of course, the sensational kidnapping of Graham Thorne, whose father won £100,000 in the Opera House lottery in 1960, and his 8-year-old son was snatched for ransom. Huge story, as you see. The interesting feature of this that it doesn't share with Trove is headlines are big. They actually cut the headline out of the story instead of just retyping it. Now that means you don't get many stories on the page. If we come down here, this is an example. A whole screen. I haven't magnified this. This is exactly how it looked on my screen. Hunt for kidnapper swings into French's Forest area. There are a few things we can click on here. We could choose the whole page and we jump through into what's called viewer mode. Here we see we're in viewer mode and it shows us the whole page. For the moment, let's jump back to search, and instead of clicking on the page, let's click on the story, which opens a different viewer focusing just on that individual story. We can use scroll bars to move through the story, and it will allow us to look at an image of the page exactly as it appeared, similar to the right hand side of Trove. Here we have a button called text. Click on it. It changes to image, and here we have the optical character recognition text. So this is the middle column on Trove where a computer has read the story. We could click image and jump back. If we're uncertain, here clearly the computer has had trouble interpreting this line. If we wanted to check it for ourselves what it meant, we could jump back to image. But for the moment, I think we might have a look at article view. Well, the whole thing is article view. The arrow takes us to the next article. So we can step through the paper one story at a time. Here, naturally, if we click on page, it takes us to the page on which that story, and we notice the first article came from page 1. This one is on page 4. So article view has moved us to a new page without us having to know that. Here we have a button called thumbnails. If we click on it, it shows us, quite literally, a smaller version that we can scroll through of the whole paper. If we find a page that we're interested in, click on it, and it jumps us through to that page. You have the option of reading an article in Article Viewer, or we can, in fact, that looks interesting, late decision on lead captain, we can in fact magnify the story here, and you can just about read it. The problem is that you can in fact magnify it beyond the point at which the text becomes too fuzzy. But this, I think, is the great thing about relatively modern papers. I don't have personal recollection of too many events before 1955, but here in 1960, Canterbury Rugby League team captain Brian Davies has little chance of playing in the match against St George at the SCG today. Now, I didn't know that Buller Davies had played for Canterbury, but I did know that he was the coach of Brothers here in Brisbane in the late 60s when I was a fairly avid fan. So once we get into these 1960s papers, you're beginning to see stories of which you have personal experience. So I hope I've demonstrated to you there that the Sydney Morning Herald archive, not difficult to use, many similarities to Trove, just enough differences for it to be fun and you to do a bit of backtracking and working out what happens in which view, the search view, the browse view, the viewer view, the page view, or the article view. But let's back up a little bit and have a look at some of the other free resources that you can find here in E-Resources. Here we see the Oxford Dictionary of Family Names. We mentioned this late last year, I think, that Oxford University Press made this wonderful resource available free for a short time as a promotion. You can look up how common your family name is, who were the earliest people to carry it, where the name predominated in various censuses. I was disappointed when it went off for free. I should have realised, of course, it's available free all the time through the E-Resources. Some of the other options we can look at, British Library newspapers. Huge collection. You'll see here Part 1, 1800 to 1900, Part 2, 1741 to 1950. Parts 1 and 2 cover the same time period but different papers. Enormous amount of information to find there. If you're into Irish ancestry, the Dublin Castle records. Ireland, of course, was ruled by the British from Dublin up until 1922, when they retreated to Ulster. And so these are records which were held in Dublin Castle. You can probably access them through TNAQ, but you can also search them here in E-Resources. Not just newspapers and books. Here, this 19th century collections online, Mapping the World, maps and travel literature. You could easily lose an afternoon in there, or back to the world of newspapers, but the Illustrated London News Historical Archive, the first paper to really promote we have pictures. Often in the early days they weren't photographs, they were line drawings, but some wonderful resources you can find in there to illustrate your family history. And if you think you'd like to get in and explore some more, notice up here, research guides. Click on that and it gives you a list of all the research guides that the library offers, one of which, when you scroll down, they're in alphabetical order, is one on E-Resources. So you can grab that. I think you can get it as a multi-page PDF, so you can print it out and have it beside you in the library while you're working on these. I promised you at the outset that I would demonstrate how to log in. So instead of messing with E-Resources login, I went to a different page, this time the National Library Catalogue, where my computer didn't recognise that it could log me in automatically. So when I clicked on log in, it popped up this very simple screen, which I remember is almost exactly the same as the one on E Resources, and I simply put in my user ID and my family name. Now, I've blocked out my user ID because one of the odd things about the National Library is that your surname, your family name, is your password. So it's important to keep your user ID secret if you don't want someone else using your account. So how do I know what my user ID is? I simply got out my National Library of Australia reader card, flipped it over, and there was my number on the back. You don't have a National Library reader card? Well, you need to click here and take into this registration page. The only requirement to register is that you have an Australian residential address. Anybody who lives in Australia can sign up for a card. The catch is, if you normally use a post office box to receive your mail, you have to tell them your residential address as well. You can have it sent to a postal address, but you must indicate where you live. And that is the wonderful world of e-resources for the which is available for you through the National Library of Australia. So if we exit that, and I do hope people are still out there. There's nothing. Oh, hang on. Maybe. No, nobody's chatting. You're all totally enthralled, or you're not there. Never mind. Let's jump across and have our first of our 2-minute tips of the day. Let's see what happens.
Paul here. Just thought I'd post a quick 2-minute tip while I'm here in Heathrow Tower. Don't worry, it's all okay. I'm on a break. Good people in the background are looking after the aeroplanes. Everything will be fine. Last week, Bob showed you how to print from an image in Ancestry, and I thought that today I'd just give you a quick look at a little tip that I use when I'm printing a transcript from Ancestry. Might be something that everybody knows, but you know, maybe there are some people like me that are slow to grab it. So here we go. Here is a marriage record that I found in Ancestry, and as you can see, it has a lot of extra stuff down the side here, all these suggested records, this stuff here about the source citation and information. I'm interested in that, but I don't want all this other gunk down here and all this sort of stuff. So when I print, usually what I do when I print is I go Control P, and that gives me a fairly ugly little presentation with this bit here, that's half done. It's got all of this other stuff down the bottom. I don't want any of that. So what we'll do is we'll just cancel that, and I'll go up here to this print button, and I always open that in a new tab just because that's the way I roll. And that gives me this. And now if I go to Control, as you can see, this is much more concise. And if I go to Control P from there to print that, this is what it looks like, and that's much neater, and still got the citation and the information, etc., but a much nicer presentation. So I just print it from there. So my tip is to always press this print button up here in the corner rather than just doing Control P to get things started. And it's as easy as that.
Well, thank you very much for that, Paul. Believe it or not, Paul isn't with us this morning, so he has missed his second appearance in the virtual meetings in a week, or in 2 weeks apart, but he will be back in future sessions. Certainly, I'm encouraging him strongly to contribute further pieces. And if anybody else would like to become a media star, let me know and we can arrange something. As I hinted at the outset of our meeting, this began as a 2-minute tip, but as I struggled to get all the information that I was discovering down into a 2-minute snippet, I was failing dismally. And I thought, yeah, there's this feeling of frustration. I thought I knew how to do this, and now I don't. So what I'm going to do is invite you to explore with me. Let's turn that off, and let's put that back on for a moment, because it started without me, which is a terrible thing for it to do. Restart playback when the source becomes active. Okay. So I thought we might as well start by looking at how things were, so that we'd know exactly what's been altered. So let's begin by looking at a presentation from 2018 on how to use this interactive mapping tool. So back in 2018, you needed to go to the URL pdonline.brisbane.queensland.gov.au. That's still the address that we need to use. Once you get there, you're asked to complete a form that says you agree to the terms and conditions. And when you do that and scroll to the bottom, you see the link to interactive mapping. Well, today, if we go here, we see exactly the same form. So we can take the cobwebs off that one as well. Back in 2018, when we clicked on interactive mapping, we saw this. Looks familiar? Today, you'll be presented with this. At first glance, it appears very different, but almost everything that you're familiar with is in there somewhere. We just need to check how to find it. So let's go back to 2018, and you remember we needed to click on the search button on the bar. And when we did that, it popped down the options. We could search for a suburb, a street, a full address, a lot plan. On the new version, it's all on there. No need to click search. Here we see it set up to search for an address. If we want to search for something else, we simply drop down, and there are the options we can search for. And there are a few more options now. If you don't want to make a choice at this time, you can simply click View the Map, which opens it up, and you can make those same choices afterwards. But let's compare more directly with what happened. In 2018, we chose Bailey Street, West End, clicked on Search, and this opened up. Here, if I say I want to search for a street, and I begin to type in Bailey Street, PD Online runs through its list of legal street addresses and offers us Bailey Street, West End. Exactly, well, almost exactly what we saw before. Let's go back and compare. We have a couple of options, one of which is this slider to increase or decrease the zoom. That's gone in the current version. We see instead we have a plus or a minus, but it does the same thing. It's just in fixed steps rather than continuous variation. But we could slide this map, and there we are, we're zoomed in. Second thing that we might have done here was click on Map Contents and open up the aerial photography. for comparison, let's go to the current map, and the map tools are here on the right hand side, and you see the aerial photograph of 1946 has already been selected. If we wanted to make it, what do we have over here? We've got the more modern one. If we wanted to make them look exactly the same, we can switch. It won't look exactly the same because you notice the aerial photo here is 2017, whereas on the old version we were looking at a 2012. So there may well be some different buildings, but we've got pretty much the same thing. So really the big difference at the moment is that the map tools, instead of coming from a bar at the top, are free floating, and by default they're on the right hand side, and I don't think we can drag them around. No, we can't. We can roll them up and unroll them, but we can't drag them to the other side. What else did we do back in 2018? We switched to the aerial photo of 46, which we've already done. Interestingly, notice that on the previous version we'd selected Bailey Street and the line was consistent. It seems to get lost in the modern one. If we flip between views, the red line marking the street goes missing. I don't know whether that's deliberate or just a consequence of the change in coding, but you just have to remember now which street you are looking at. Our next example, we went back, well, we've done that, and oh, that's right, we wanted to find out the property details of a particular lot on this map. So we had to click here to activate property and then come down and click on the property that we wanted, and details popped up. Whereas on this version, we better get our base map so we'll know where to click. Bring it up again, and in fact we're zoomed out a little bit far. We might need to zoom in slightly. There's our property description. There's a point at which the map decides whether or not it's going to show you property boundaries. You might need to just adjust your zoom level. Here was 12 Bailey Street, and I don't need to say I want the property details. All I need to do is double click on it. It highlights the property. We pop out on the left hand side all the details of 12 Bailey Street, West End. The function is still there, we just activate it in a slightly different way. You recall back in 2018, for property holding details, click here, and when we clicked there it opened up a page which could be printed describing the lot 28 on registered plan 81227, and the current one. The same thing is here. We simply click on that there and it gives us same information in a nicer format, even gives us a little drawing of the map to show us where we are. So while superficially it looks like a lot of things have changed, it's pretty much exactly as it was under the hood. So that, for example, if I go back out and search for a particular address, let's try the place where I grew up, 10 Plymouth Street, Alderley. There it is. There's only one Plymouth Street that it knows. That's the one that I want. There's 10 Plymouth Street. Because I've searched for an address, not a street, the left-hand panel is active, telling me that it was 473 square metres. Seemed bigger when I was 4 or 5. It's in fact lot 209 on registered plan 19258, and if I pop up the 1946 map to see what the house looked like, I see nothing because it hadn't been built. The house was built in 1952 when we moved in. Dad used his war service home loan to have the house built, so all there was in 1946 was a vacant lot. PD Online, still very useful, fantastic source for the 1946 aerial photos. New aerial photo updated to 2017, and not all that different to navigate than when we last looked. So I hope you'll take the opportunity to go in and find lots of interesting information. So at the end of that, I was actually pretty confident that I did still know how to do this. But I think it's something that we all feel often. You come across a tool that you've used, a piece of software, a website, you feel really confident about it, and someone has changed the damn thing. I was very fortunate here that I'm able to look back through my archive of presentations and do a side-by-side comparison there. I think part of the frustration for many of us is that we think we remember how it used to work, but we're not actually certain that that was how it used to be. But I certainly, as I concluded that segment, it's still really useful. After I'd finished making that little piece, because I've just been away topping up my coffee cup while you were watching that, I did check a couple of URLs, and it looks as though Council is about to change it again. There's a new site coming which looks, I'm not certain of this, as though it doesn't include the aerial photos. So I'm hoping that PD Online will continue to provide us with access to those photos when the new development site becomes live. So thanks, Les, for highlighting the fact that those changes had been made. And as I say, I do have a short 2-minute tip version of that, which we might sneak in towards the end of the meeting. But before that, I think we do have another tip, and let's see. Don't you hate it when a search on a subscription site gives you hundreds of results, but you can't find the one you really need buried in amongst them? Why on earth is it so difficult to select a single record set to search on? Well, it's not difficult, but in Find My Past, they've got it well hidden. Ironically, if you want to search on a single record set, you have to select all record sets under the quick links. That opens up a full catalogue of all of the available records. Now, I'm at this moment interested in some births in County Fermanagh in Ireland. So let's go through and specify I'm interested in births in Ireland and County Fermanagh. County Fermanagh, Northern Ireland. And here we see the Fermanagh Parish Registers of Baptisms, Irish births, Ireland nonconformist births, a much more limited set. Well, I might try those parish registers first of all. Now that I've selected a particular record set, only then will I put in the name in which I'm interested in searching. And I see a maximum of 14 results, much better than wading through hundreds of results for funerals in the United States, censuses in Lithuania, simply by choosing which record sets we search in. Okay, that's 2 weeks out of 2 that Bozo has forgotten to turn his microphone on while he fixes the other problems. So we've come up to our major feature of the day. As promised, browsing unindexed images. Now I'm doing things a little differently to my normal practice, so let's see how we go. That looks good. What I'm going to do is jump into the middle of the story and try to dig my way out. I hope you'll bear with me. The story begins when someone showed me this document which they had extracted from Family Search. They said, "Oh, you'll be interested in this." I go, "Oh yeah, why?" "Well, that's your second great-grandfather's burial, isn't it?" There he is. Whoop, get the laser up. Henry Cramer. He died on the 9th of January 1880, so this is the day after. Buried in plot 102 of the Wesleyan section of the cemetery at Gimpy. And look, it even gives us the name of the sexton who was responsible for organising the mechanics of the burial. I thought, oh, yeah, that's pretty good. Where did this come from? Yeah, well, it's in this microfilm. There's a 391 image film, and this is image 340. But yes, but where does it come from? What is it? Well, let's see if we can backtrack and find out. First thing you notice is that there's a button over here which allows us to look at several frames at a time, which is a great way for sorting quickly through them. So let's flip through. We're looking at individual pages here, but with this scroll bar we can in fact wriggle up and down and look for changes, and the type of change we're looking for is this one. This appears to be the end of a book. Here's the blank back cover, and this is the start of a book. So let's click on that one and see in detail what we've got. And it is indeed the first image of a new book, Interments in Gimpy Cemetery from November 1869. We've got some headings here now: lot number, date, name, adult, sex, child. Don't see too many references to sex in there, and denomination. And this appears to be the earliest burials in the cemetery, because here someone's buried in lot number 1. W.H. Cronin, a child, first person buried in the cemetery on 5th of December 1869. And then on the 18th they reopened grave 1. That seems unlikely. No, they didn't. The numbers only apply within the section of the cemetery. So there was a grave number 1 in the Episcopalian or the Anglican section, and a grave number 1 in the Catholic section, and down here a grave number 1 for Presbyterians and a grave number 1 for Baptists. So important to know there that we need to read those two things together. Well, that's appears to be the book. We know what it is. Let's just keep searching. Let's go back into our multi-page and scroll up and see what we get. Oh, there's the beginning of another one. And here, what's this say? Gimpy Cemetery. So this is a second book. Remember, we're working backwards through here. So if the first one was in 1869, how can there be a book? Well, let's have a look and find out. Well, this is the first thing that you find about these unindexed collections. There's very often multiple sets of records on a single film, and they aren't necessarily in the order you would expect. So here they did the 1893 to 1900 book, and then went back and did the 1869 book. So don't simply assume that it's all going to work nicely in order. At least at the start of this book, he indicated what he meant by some of his abbreviations. A for adult, C for child. PAGs are pagans. Good to know. Very sad one here. SB is stillborn. You may have noticed quite a number of them. Mrs. John Trotter's stillborn child. Mrs. T. Humphrey's stillborn child. An awful lot of babies were lost late in the pregnancy around that time. They were tough times in the 1890s in country Queensland. So let's do the same again. Let's go back, look at our multi-page view and scroll up and see what else we can find. Well, hang on. Before we do scroll up, what are these here? These clearly are books. What's this lot? Index cards. And apparently not in chronological order, as the previous book was, but sorted alphabetically. And not Gimpy Cemetery, Mount Perry Cemetery. Goodness me, what have we got here? Let's keep exploring. We're back to the top. Looks like those first 300 odd are all index cards. This looks interesting. Let's have a look, see what that is. This tells us what the whole film was. In Sydney, May 1978, a long time before I got into family history. Records for Maryborough, Apple Tree Creek, Mount Perry, Gin Gin and Gimpy cemeteries were filmed. The title of the record is Cemetery Indexes. And the years include 1869 through to 1900. So that first 1869 book may be some of the earliest there. If we have a look at the next screen, it tells us a little more about it. That the Genealogical Society of Utah, which of course became Family Search, indicating that this index was compiled by Sister Alison Rogers, the Bundaberg branch of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, taken from the records of the books. Cemeteries include, and they're in alphabetical order, but here we also have is a transcription of the Gimpy Cemetery. So we know that's not the original book. I did suspect that it wasn't an original record, but it's a transcription taken from the Sexton's records, 1869 to 90, compiled in chronological order by Elder and Sister Gardner. So at least I'm doing pretty well here. I now know what I've got. I've interpreted all of this, but what's this stuff over here? Let's have a look in more detail. The top part tells us that it's multiple records. Now, exactly why Gimpy and Apple Tree Creek get to be highlighted, but others on the same film aren't. And here we see, well, there's a lot of categories here, archival reference number, which haven't been filled in, unfortunately. It does tell us who was the keeper of the records. It's Jim Rogers, the husband of Alison, Elder Rogers of the Church of the Latter-day Saints. A DGS number, not quite sure what DGS stands for, but it appears to be a unique number, so write it down, we may need it later. And the citation, let's pop that out. This would normally be used when you copy it in, but what I eventually worked out was that this horror is a URL which will take you directly to that collection. So at least I can now show people where this record came from. Notice there's another button up here called Attach to Family Tree. Now, I'm not going to show you how I've done that because we'll be here until lunchtime, but suffice to say that I did it, and what it means is if I now go and search for the person, Heinrich Cramer, here we see there are sources. Click it open. Gimpy Cemetery cemetery record, created by me. View the source. Even though it says I created it, the only line I actually put in was this one, the burial of Henry Cramer. All the rest of it was generated automatically, and the key thing is there is that same URL, which is a link. So now I don't need to search for the document which showed me the details of Heinrich or Henry Cramer's burial. I can do it from his person page on Family Search. And if I click there, it takes me straight back to it. Wonderful. But if that record hadn't been shown to me, how could I have found it? And this is what I mean about dropping you into the middle. I now have a real reason for investigating this thing. There's great stuff in there, but how on earth do you find it? Well, like those genealogy pages, which have always been there, I've just never noticed them, the image entry has always been there. But I go in, I either search records or I search the catalogue, sometimes the research wiki. There are others there that I've never looked at. So if we go to search images, it takes us to this page, explore the historical images, and it has a reasonably manageable URL of its own, familysearch.org records images. So this is where we can get in and try to explore some more about them. Before we start, one of the key things, obviously it's a frequently asked question, right in the middle, why can't I search names? Well, they have a very long explanation. I prefer this one. You can search for names, but you won't find any. These records have not yet been indexed. All the times that you get to search for names is because someone has gone through the records and extracted the names and put them in the database. That hasn't happened yet. And it's going to take a while because notice, I think that says there are 4,000 million images in the collection. So we might need to find out how to deal with it without searching for names. The secret is, don't think of the person's name, focus on the places where the records were created. That's how they've been organised. So you go in and you start typing in the name of a place, and remember, Family Search relies upon standardised place names. So when you begin to type, it throws up some possibilities. Am I looking for Pozières near Stanthorpe in Queensland, or Pozières on the Somme in France? They're connected, of course, because Pozières in Queensland was a soldier settlement for men who came back from the First War. So type slowly. When you see the item that you want, click on it and it will auto-complete. Seriously, do it. If you simply keep typing as I've done here and then said search, it says select an item from the drop down. It still doesn't know which of these I want and it won't guess. So don't simply type in Pozières, Queensland, Pozières near Stanthorpe. Click on here to indicate that you're accepting a standardised location. So this should be a really quick way of getting back to those cemetery records. Begin to type in Gimpy, and I get two options: Gimpy, Queensland, Australia, and Gimpy Cemetery, Gimpy, Queensland, Australia. Well, that's got to be it. That's 1869 to the present. That's exactly it. This is going to be a really short presentation. Click on that. No results were found. And the hint, try searching in Gimpy, because some of the Gimpy Cemetery results may be labelled as Gimpy. In fact, even though the individual book is about Gimpy Cemetery, the collection doesn't have cemetery in its name. Remember, it said Apple Creek, Gin, Maryborough. What we're looking at here is dealing with the labels that people have put on collections, not the information which is actually in the image. So I see some frustration ahead. So let's take a fresh start. What do they have that relates to Melbourne? So I begin to type Melbourne. It throws up a number of options. Did you know there was a farm in Sri Lanka called Melbourne? I didn't. Family Search does. But I want the city in Victoria. Click on it and up it comes. Well, it doesn't, because all I've done at this point is confirm that's the one I want. I've got to hit search image groups now, and it pops up in this screen. Oh, excuse me. On the left hand side there's a little map showing where the records come from, and on the right hand side quite a comprehensive description of what we've got: dates, record types, image counts, titles, volume numbers, archival references. This is looking pretty good. It's going to be straightforward, but it says there are 123 results, so let's scroll down and see. Oh, some of them don't have titles, don't have volumes, don't have archival reference numbers. It just says Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, funeral home record, 364 images, or 530 images. Sometimes the only way you can work out what's in there, if it's worth looking at, is to click on it and open it up. And here we see basically the same display as we saw for the document I started on. So that frame number 4 is a pretty important one. If we have a look, it should tell us, yep, there it is, filmed in March of 1983. It's the burial register maintained by Tobin Brothers Undertakers in North Melbourne between 1934 and 1942. So if you had family members buried, this may, let's pick a page at random and see what we get. Not enormously different to the Gimpy one. Let's magnify one up here. Here we have the burial of Ian David Mills. He was a male, died on the 21st of March 1936, buried 2 days later in Pakenham Cemetery, the Presbyterian section. Oh dear, he was a little fella, 2 years and 9 months of age. Now, you know me, I can't help but be distracted sometimes. So at this point you can jump out and follow a little fork in the road. You can go to PROV, conduct a search, and confirm that, yep, this is exactly right. This was little Ian David Mills. That was when he did die. There were his parents' names, and we can go back and confirm that the parents' marriage took place. So this is an interesting collection for jumping off and comparing, but let's focus more now on what's in there. So if searching just for the place didn't help, what's this show more search options? It gives us a couple of possibilities, a date and a life event. Well, this should mean that I can go straight back to the one I was looking at, because I know that he died in 1936. So specify that, and no results found. 1936 may have been the year in which he died, but it's not the label on the image, which, if I think back, was 1934 to 1942, I think. The problem is, of course, that you don't know the dates that are on the images until you found the image, so you can't use them to find the image in the first place. The second thing is, try setting the life event to all. Death didn't help. Okay. And they even suggest maybe I should broaden from Melbourne to the whole of Victoria. I've got a feeling I'm going backwards here. What about this advanced search? We've used the extra fields. What's in the advanced search? This opens up new field, record type, DGS number, creator. That looks a bit familiar. Yep, it's the same stuff that we saw on the right-hand side of our page of cemetery books. Custodian, DGS number. So once again, if I've already found the document, I can easily re-find it by putting in the DGS number, which is unique, and I would jump to it. But it's not awfully helpful until you found the document in looking for documents that you don't know what it is you're looking for. You may also realise that the same things is down the left-hand side of that page. So, in fact, a bit like we've seen in other cases, you don't need to make these decisions at the outset. You can, in fact, jump straight into a place and then filter later on. So, take out death and put in funeral home record. Surely I must find him now. No, because I'm probably still too specific on my 1936. But by gee, I'm learning a lot as I go along here. Let's take a little sidetrack again. Notice up here on the top right, there are a couple of icons. What are they? The first one shows map. Click it, and we pop out the map. Instead of a little thumbnail map over here, we've got a big one. And it says you can search by map area. Now that's not enormously helpful in this case, because there's only a single point on the map, the centre of Melbourne, because all of these records are just called Melbourne. But there is a facility to search by map area, and it took me a while, but I worked out that if I went to an area like Durham in the north of England and search, show me any records that you have in this area, it pops up multiple little pointers indicating we have a record set that relates to this place and a record to that. Newcastle upon Tyne, the big city, of course, is all there, but sometimes this looks like it might be useful, and I can jump back to list view and see them all listed down there. What's this other one here? Show. Let's have a look. Click on show and it pops up the columns which we can include or not in this display. Potentially useful, except of course that a lot of the fields are empty, so even if we're showing title and volume, there might not be anything to look at. One of the other things we can do is explore the life events. Death and birth weren't terribly useful, but there is a life event called residence. And when I chose it, it gave me a number of options, similar to Ancestry and Find My Past actually. You can get a residence event from a census record. So possibilities of adjusting these gradually. Don't hope to find the silver bullet which takes you straight through to exactly to a record set that you want, but some possibilities to work with there. But really, you just got to, it's just like taking a big book down from the shelf, just browse through, read carefully, and I'll show you an example of what I hope we can find like that. Here is a URL. Don't ask me how I found it yet, but if you've got a URL, jump in and see where it leads you. And here we see this looks to be newspapers. The place is Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. I'm learning that this card here is usually an important one to have a look at, and it tells me that this was microfilmed by the Society, the Rogers family again. We owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude for the years that they spent saving records that we didn't know we needed. It's births, deaths and marriages in the Telegraph newspaper. No year on here at the moment. Well, let's dive in and see. Oh my goodness. It looks like the whole newspaper. It isn't, in fact. They've torn out the births, deaths and marriage page from each paper in the Telegraph for a whole year and saved them up. So on each frame that you're looking at, you can find that one. If you're lucky, on the bottom, you'll find the day and the date. Over here, it's been chopped off. So for those days, you've simply got to count back. Fortunately, we know if this is January the 2nd, that will be January the 1st. Bear in mind the Telegraph wasn't published on Sundays, so you'll skip all those dates. We have a reasonable way of working. When you find a day that you're interested in, it is quite literally an image of the page. Pop it up, read down in memoriams, funeral notices. Not terribly interesting to us these days. Well, why do you want that, Bob? You can get deaths up to 88. We don't need these. Yep, the funeral notices and the in memoriams are not so useful, but the births and the engagements and the marriages, which we cannot get from BMDs, are very useful here. And remember, on the bottom of each image there will be a citation. Now, I was worried by this one because you notice this here, NAN, image index equals NAN. Now, it's not just your grandmother, it's a piece of jargon used by programmers to stand for not a number. Oh dear. But fortunately, that's on the whole, on the general page. If in fact you save it, it shows with the appropriate number in there. So you can save the citation for any individual that you're looking at. It's just emphasise here, this was the one we started with. It identifies a whole group, a collection of records, which includes individual records that can be identified by this. Now you notice there are all sorts of similarities. TH909, TH90968. It's indicating that it's the same set. This one is showing us a particular image within the set. So this is how to find the set. This is how to reference an individual image in it. If we go back into our search here, this time looking at Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, lots and lots of records. I chose record type newspaper down here, and it popped up 2 sets. Doesn't tell me a whole lot about them, but fortunately I'm an observant lad, and I remember that the set that we were just looking at, the collection, had 1,929 images in it. So this is one we haven't looked at yet. And it's 1961 to 62. Not the Rogers this time. The Cox family, ZJ and VS Cox of Kangaroo Point, who have collected pages from the telly for 61 and 62, except they didn't collect pages. They used sticky notes. They went through and copied each item in the births, deaths and marriages onto sticky notes, pasted them in the book in alphabetical order with start and finish letters. So here we can extract from this 2 references to documents or to records that have been found. So how on earth do we deal with this? I've learned a lot in the last couple of days doing this. The first thing is that these are enormously rich resources. There's some fantastic stuff in there, and I have no idea what's hidden in that 4,000 million images, and I suspect that no one else does either. What we need to do is to explore. Just sit down and wade through it. Sift the wheat from the chaff. When we find a treasure, record the details and share them. It's going to take a lot of people and a long time, but it will be worth it. And this is an example of what I think we can do. What I've done here is I've written a short description of those last 2 collections that I showed you. A general description at the top. They're vital records concerning the Brisbane location, 61 to 68, and they're from newspapers. I've then given a description of, one's a transcription, the other one are images of the full pages. There's 1,300 images in one and 1,900 in the other. What I'm going to do is put that on a page in our website. Not quite sure where I'm going to put it yet. I don't know who else might use it, but I reckon if each of us dived into this collection and found something useful and wrote a little link to it, we could expose a whole lot of valuable information to other people. And that brings us to the end. Well, it's not the end, is it? It's only the beginning. I've barely scratched the surface. There's a whole lot of stuff I don't know, but let's exit that there. Yeah, a whole lot of stuff that I don't know, but we need to do things with. Now, my voice is just about gone, so I'm going to take the opportunity to pop up another tip. Did you know that there was aerial photos shot of the whole of the Greater Brisbane area in 1946? Wouldn't it be great to see where the ancestral home or workshop or maybe even just the chook shed was located? Well, if you have the lot and plan property description of the area, you can find it. And by lot and plan, I mean the description after 1985. If the description you have is pre-1985, there's another step you'll need to do before you can follow this tip. We begin by going to Google search, of course, and simply typing in PD Online Brisbane. That's PD for property development. And you'll see the very first result is the one that we want. So click on it. When it opens, you'll see a tab called Interactive Mapping. That's the one you need. Give it a click. The search bar in the middle, where it says address, drop it down and change it to lot on plan. In this case, I'm going to be looking for lot 11 on registered plan 10095. And there it is. And the plan opens, and here we see marked out in red 11 RP 10095, which happens to be at 35 Jordan Terrace, Bowen Hills. What I'm looking at here is the base map showing the property boundaries. If I want to know what it looks like now, I can click on the 2017 aerial photo, and there it is, my Gunya House Museum. But far more interesting is the 1946 aerial photo, and we'll see looking almost exactly the same because the house has been preserved as a museum. You can now use any method that you like to capture that image. That ended suddenly, didn't it? Not quite sure. We might need a more elegant ending. We are running very late, so let's quickly have a look at what we might have coming up. I've scheduled 3 virtual meetings, 2 in October, 1 in November, and leaving open the possibility that we may find something to do together to celebrate Christmas. September the 29th, which is next Tuesday afternoon, an interesting online session run by the State Library called Research Reveals Sound as Historical Material. One to appeal to the podcast fans that we have. I'm going to try to catch that one on my way home from National Archives session. Things are getting busy. 2nd of October, Helen sent out a notice about this one, and the Redcliffe Library for 2 hours on the 2nd of October, the local history group, or local history service, is organising 20-minute sessions where you can put on your white gloves and handle some real historical documents. I haven't checked this morning. Bookings were filling up, but if there's any available, jump online and find out what's going on. On the 6th, Helen Smith is back with us with a presentation on industrial health and safety. My job is killing me. That's from 10 o'clock through Teams, and you'll need to book for that through the library website as you will for the white gloves. Fair way ahead, October 30, a cemetery walking tour of Lawton Cemetery, not virtual, real people walking around amongst real dead people. I've highlighted it here because bookings will open on the 1st of October for the 30th. So write it in your diary twice. 30th of October is the date. The 1st of October is when you need to jump online and sign up. As always, hat, sunscreen, water and sturdy shoes required to participate. And sadly, because of the health requirements, no morning tea this time. And finally, for those who are interested in such matters, GSQ is running a session via Zoom on the 7th of November, how to use Facebook for family history research. That might be of interest to some of us. And I think that's the end, which brings us to a very long and busy session. Let's just get rid of that for the moment. And I was fibbing slightly when I said that I was in my own home doing this, but it is a rather nice place that I'm pretending to be in, and it is in fact the Maigunya House Museum that we just saw in the 2-minute tip, where I'll be tomorrow in my other job. They don't let me play with any of the pretties upstairs. As always, the archivist is locked up downstairs. But wonderful material at Maigunya. And I do like to sit in the parlour, even if it's only virtually. And we do hope maybe next year that the house will reopen to visitors. Certainly it's a bit odd being there under the house, my space in the dungeon, and not to hear people walking overhead during the day. So at 10:47, it's been a long and busy morning. My apologies for those who had other things to do. You can catch up with the recording, as can a couple of people who very kindly sent me a message to say, look, I won't be there live. I mean, it's not necessary, but very nice to hear. And the stinger in the tale, of course, they said, but I'll be able to catch the recording, won't I, Bob? I said, well, yes, but bear in mind, I don't record these sessions myself. It's done automatically by YouTube. And at this instant, there are probably thousands of live streams going on worldwide. So it can take a day before YouTube can let me get the recording, and then it takes me a while to make it presentable. One of my helpful family made the observation the other day, wouldn't the editing be quicker if you made fewer mistakes? Yeah, that's the sort of helpful thing that children offer their ageing parents. And I'll practice again next fortnight to make fewer mistakes. Until then, bye, and we'll catch up soon.